Hey everyone, welcome back to 996 The Howl. Hope you're enjoying the break off of Coyotes hockey. Also just want to reiterate, if you're in the valley, to go watch some of these games. It's the last home games ever to be played in Glendale. It was a great showing last Friday against Tampa Bay. It was a rocking house. I'm sure they took advantage of the postponement of the game to sell more tickets. So, just go out and show your support the last couple home games before the end of Hiller River Arena. I know, maybe you don't want to give money to Glendale, but it would make them think twice about what they did. And so, if they lose all that good revenue for the last, 2 months of home games, it will hit them even harder of the mistake they made. And also, I kind of did join the dark side and subscribe to The Athletic, but they're having an offer of only $1 per month. My original plan was just to do a free trial just for this article, but now that, I have it $1 for 6 months, I guess I could do other Coyote articles. If you guys or folks want me to address other articles on The Athletic, I'm happy to. I would have never spent $7 per month for The Athletic after the smear campaign they did for the Coyotes. But, this is an interesting article. I love the author and journalist LeBrun. He does a lot of work for TSN and other sports networks. It's a very fair article and interesting, and it's what we should expect for the Coyotes moving forward. So let's start here. The title is obviously the Coyotes GM Bill Armstrong and why they went to scorched earth and the long road ahead. The Arizona Coyotes, this was written in November, obviously, so they were last place at some point. Seems like a fairy tale that they were last place. I think they're just going to be 31st place for the rest of the season. I think it's impossible to catch Montreal. Even with their new coaching change in Montreal, they still can't get those wins. And the trade deadline is just going to make them even worse. They already traded Tyler Toffoli. So, I think Montreal Canadiens will finish last. But, as we read this article, that's sort of the plan here, is to get just a really good draft pick, not necessarily finish last. So we could skip that. The organization woes are on the ice are mitigated behind the scenes by the knowledge that a plan is in motion. That's what differentiates the Coyotes to the Canadiens, where Montreal wasn't expected to finish last. I mean, you don't trade a first-round pick and a second-round pick in a few years for Christian Dvorak. You don't do that if you're trying to finish last place. So there are better days ahead, obviously, if that game plan hits. But man, it's a daunting rebuild, and I agree there. It's easy to look at the standings and say the Coyotes, they suck. Very candid. GM Bill Armstrong told The Athletic, there's a thought process here. We really deliberated hard as an organization about where we were going. We could have just reloaded and gone at it and made the playoff once every 4 years. If lucky, get by a first round, but most times get beat out. We had the conversation. We want to be great here. We want to take the chance to be great. And the only way to do that is through the draft. So this is where last summer I was in the camp of try again, keep trying and see what happens. They had a competent team. If they were healthy, Coyotes could have made the playoffs. They're in a weak division in the Pacific. So that was where I was going. I didn't really, take into account how hard the Central Division will be once they moved. And it's just a hard pill to swallow to go through another rebuild as a fan. So I was in denial about it. But it's great that Bill Armstrong was thinking the same, and all the ownership group and the management group thought the same. Like, they had a competent team to make the playoffs and to maybe get by the first round. But to really compete for a cup, it was never in the picture with that roster. They would have to continue to make a number of trades, just like the Taylor Hall trade. So their cupboard would have been emptied really quickly. And so instead they go the route of just, offloading all the current roster they had and then using their current cupboard and filling it up even more. So not only do you just have Hayden and Soderstrom in the pipeline, now you're adding Gunther and a whole slew of picks in 2022 and 2023. Let's continue. Armstrong dutifully went through some of the most successful rebuilds of the past 15 years, pointing out a common theme in the teams he mentions. So you got the Tampa Bay Lightning, where they got Stamkos first overall and Hedman second overall. St. Louis with Eric Johnson first overall and Pietrangelo fourth overall. Not really sure Eric Johnson was a good pick there. Then moving on, you got Washington with Ovechkin first overall and Backstrom fourth overall. Crosby was first, Malkin second for Pittsburgh. And finally for Chicago, you got Patrick Kane at first and Taves at third overall. So the theme here is you need at least one first overall, and then your second good player doesn't have to be first. So this draft, if the Coyotes draft second overall, they got another chance next season to get first overall. And I would say the 2023 first overall, which is projected to be Connor Bedard, is supposed to be just phenomenal and generational. Another sort of McDavid, Crosby, Matthews, whereas Shane Wright is honestly not even projected to be first overall this upcoming summer. There's a lot of movement at the top of this upcoming draft. So that first overall pick this year isn't going to be a generational talent. It will be a solid, top 3 forward on your team, hopefully a centerman, which is what the Coyotes also need. And to go further from this list, I also wrote down Colorado. They got McKinnon first overall and Landeskog second overall and Cale Makar fourth overall. Toronto, you got Matthews at first overall and Marner at fourth overall. Dylan Stroman third overall in that draft. And then Carolina, no first overall pick. So here, we have an example of a team that never drafted first overall, or at least if they did, he's not on the team or making an impact anymore. They got Svechnikov at second, Sebastian Aho at 35th overall. And then in the recent trade with Montreal, they got Kotkaniemi, who was a third overall draft pick. So, we look at Carolina, their rebuild took a lot longer, but they're finally an elite team, even without a first overall. Then also not mentioned is Buffalo, New Jersey, and Edmonton, who are in perpetual rebuilds and is a scary side of a scorched earth rebuild. These are all success stories, but the not success stories are Buffalo, New Jersey, maybe Ottawa, and Edmonton. They just can't get it together. Maybe Edmonton's the best one out of that group, but still, man, they struggle. The expectations are so high with having McDavid on your team. But yeah, the scary part of me with this rebuild is, are they going to turn into another Buffalo, another New Jersey, or Ottawa? Ottawa's been getting it together the past month, so maybe they turn around next season, but obviously not this season. So as Armstrong rhymes off every team and player on that list, he has made his point. You're not going to be great unless you go through the draft, Armstrong said. We made that decision last summer that we were going to do it through the draft, and we weren't going to sit on the fence. We were going to go all the way in. Somewhere in Buffalo, one of the most passionate fan bases in hockey just rolled their eyes in unison, which is what I literally just explained. It's hard to argue with the top-end draft route if you hit right, but as the Sabres have learned by undergoing yet another full rebuild under a third different management team over the past decade, there are zero guarantees of it working. Not to mention the notion that going the scorched earth route is one thing, but making sure quality veterans are still part of the dressing room along the way is also important. We saw that in the Chaika regime, where Chaika brought in Goligoski, Stepan, a couple other guys, Nick Cousins, Brad Richardson. It wasn't a very good veteran group, in hindsight, but they did help the young players grow and develop. So now under Bill Armstrong's regime, they've tried to do it with Andrew Ladd, Louis Eriksson, which did not work. Ericsson's not working out. Anton Strawman and Antoine Roussel, where we have a pretty good quality people that are trying to lengthen their careers, come in here and make a statement and work their behinds off no matter if we lose or if we win. They're bringing their professionalism to the rink every day to try and help our core. And, I mentioned that in the offseason, a lot of these players Bill Armstrong brought in are nearing the end of their careers. If they want their careers to continue, they're going to have to perform on the Arizona Coyotes. And a couple of players are doing that. Andrew Ladd, I think he's got 6 or 7 goals. He's doing pretty good. wears the A on his chest, and then Louis Eriksson, he's not putting it together. Strawman's a very good steady D-man, sort of a Nick Hjalmarsson replacement. He's been through a couple of injuries, but I really like his defensive play. He's got a couple of goals as well. And Anton Roussel, he's an energy guy. He fights sometimes. He gets into scrums. He's a talker, and he defends the Coyotes players whenever they're, some other teams are taking liberties on them. The idea is to make sure that losing itself doesn't crush the development of the core, like Jacob Chikrin, Nick Schmaltz, Clayton Keller, Lawson Krause, and Barrett Hayden. An interesting, selection of players to put in there. I would maybe omit Nick Schmaltz because I think once he starts to get it going consistently, he's a good trade bait. I think in the offseason would be a better environment to trade Schmaltz. I don't think he's getting traded this trade deadline. He mentions Lawson Krause, which Bill Armstrong has come out and said publicly that they want to hold on to Krause. So, Krause would be a good trade deadline trade, but if Bill Armstrong wants to keep a guy, that means something's good is going on with him. And the most blaring omission here would be Christian Fischer, because all these players have been on the Coyotes for a number of years, and also Christian Fischer has as well, but Christian Fischer is not really a dynamic or impact player to have his name among these other players who are, making an impact on the Coyotes roster. So this year is about being competitive and working and creating new culture with new coaches and getting the most out of our players. But at the same time, we've made a choice to look through the draft and take that chance to become a great organization. I guess I should stop here and say the plan for the Coyotes is all starting to make sense off the ice and on the ice. The Coyotes want to be a great, highly contending playoff NHL team, and they know it's going to take time. And that's why they also made this ASU deal for the next 3 or 4 years, why their new arena will be built in 3 to 4 years. Because in that third year or fourth year mark, they're going to, if the plan goes through and, they hit on some draft picks, they don't even need to hit on all of them, just some of them. They're going to be a highly competitive team in the year 3 and year 4 mark. So obviously the next 3 years are going to be trying times, both on the ice and off the ice. That's why they're able to commit to this small capacity arena, because it's just going to be a hard time to go through as both a fan, a player, and management. It's basically going to be close your eyes. We know the plan is to get high draft picks for the next 2 years at least. So if we do it in a small barn where we don't really need to be desperate about selling tickets, they only need to sell 5,000 of them, it's a good recipe, because they're not definitely going to be putting out the best product on the ice to attract 15,000 fans. So small arena, small capacity, they're going to be rebuilding. It's going to be hard to sell, but they know in that fourth year, third year, they're going to be a highly competitive team, and the crowds will draw in to go see that team, and they could fill in that new arena easier than with what they had and what they have now. So, but make no mistake, it's hard in the moment. This is a long road ahead with no guarantees at the end of it. Armstrong was a young guy in the Blues front office years ago. The Blues rebuilt well, so he's got that reference point firsthand. I was there when we picked Eric Johnson. I was there when we unloaded everybody like Dougie Weight, Billy Guerin, Keith Tkachuk. Those were 3, hugely fan favorite players that they had to move on from. And it was a hard decision to make. So, the Coyotes fans, they feel that. We felt that in the exodus of summer 2021. In many ways, Arizona's draft pick situation when Armstrong was hired in September 2020 cemented the path ahead. The previous regime not only traded away a first and third pick for Howl, but the Coyotes also forfeited a first and second pick, part of the draft combine cheating brouhaha. So we never really found out exactly what the cheating was. Maybe Chaika asked a couple guys to do some pull-ups, asked them to show up in a t-shirt and shorts, maybe asked them about their diet. I don't think it's ever been confirmed exactly what rule was broken by John Chaika's regime. So acquiring draft capital became more than a priority. It became Arizona's, whatever that means. I have no idea what that French word means. So bye-bye OEL, Connor Garland, Darcy Kemper, Aiden Hill, Christian Dvorak, sell, and picks. It's how they netted the 9th overall pick last summer, Dylan Guenther, and how they acquired 2 second-round picks in Josh Stone and Yanis Moser, who's obviously playing for the Coyotes, and Ilya Fedotov, who's playing in the Junior Russian League. Hopefully he gets a KHL next season. But the real bonanza potentially is the 2022 draft, where the Coyotes have 3 first-round picks and 5 second-round picks. Armstrong has revamped his scouting staff, hiring the likes of Daryl Plandowski in October 2020 as a director of amateur scouting after he spent 12 years in Tampa Bay. And Tampa Bay, the past 12 years, have drafted so well, so phenomenally well, that all their players, just whoever comes in, is just excelling, producing, and making an impact on the team. Armstrong also hired Ryan Jankowski in October 2020 and hired Alan Heppel last summer as a director of pro scouting after spending 19 seasons with the Avalanche front office, the last 6 years as director of amateur scouting. Obviously, the past 5 to 10 years for the Avalanche have also been phenomenal in drafting players. So that's some good pedigree players. Ryan Jankowski was part of the Buffalo Sabres, so he knows the draft really well, being part of the Sabres. So the next 3 years are all about drafting and development. Obviously, it's not by accident. We try to put in the right staff with a ton of experience to help with the odds of picking the right people to help this organization move forward and win a championship. Armstrong also has Shane Doan, Larry Plew, and John Ferguson surrounding him in the organization. John Ferguson is the assistant GM for the Coyotes. So behind the scenes, maybe the standings don't look it, but there is a plan. Armstrong said, "We've hired great people to lead us through and make sure the process is right as we move forward." So it's great to see that ownership and management and the whole scouting department are on the same page. They know where to go. They know the direction, and they know the path forward to a winning elite NHL team. So it's just great everyone's on the same page. It always gets muddied when different positions of management are on different pages and they're not cohesive in the direction they want to go. And so the 2022 draft, looms large. How good of a draft is it? Corey Pronman, the Athletics draft guru, says most scouts believe it's not an overly strong draft, which I thought it was always a strong draft, so I would disagree. Others believe it is possible some major junior players can emerge in the second half given the chaos from last year's pandemic-affected season. It's a good draft. I think we'll know more as we move along. It's still really early. At the time of this article, it was November. So honestly, only 3 months ago. It's a different year because a lot of guys have been off and you have to be patient. In the meantime, there's a trade deadline, March 21st. I thought it was 29th. It might have been postponed because of the postponements, but it's late March, whatever it is, where the Coyotes hope to add more picks. Obviously, the trade bait is pending UFA Phil Kessel. We've been having honest conversation with Phil from the get-go. Phil has been a good player for us here. He's come in and worked his butt off and played hard every single game for us. He's someone that, as he gets older, still maintains his skating. That's the greatest thing. He's got the natural goal-scoring ability. He continues to be good for us. And he's assisting a lot, not really scoring as much, but he continues to be an elite playmaker on the Coyotes, and I'm sure with better line mates in the NHL. And of course, the Coyotes will try yet again to be creative with their cap space as they were last year, having netted picks that way. As this reporter has reported, the Coyotes tried hard to get in on the Jack Eichel deal with Vegas as a third-party broker willing to rent out cap space, but in the end, Vegas and Buffalo were able to strike a deal without Arizona being involved. Now, people have hypothesized that Vegas still needs to unload some contracts to fit Eichel, Martinez, and Stone on the same roster, but now Stone is on long-term injured reserve, so maybe Stone comes back for the playoffs, but if it's projected by Vegas that he's going to come back earlier, they need to load off either Riley Smith or Evgeny Dadonov. So, the Coyotes might be a middleman there. I don't see them taking on salary for Dadonov because he has one more year in his contract, and I don't think the Coyotes want to take on a $5 million contract. I think it's more better and smarter to acquire Riley Smith because I'm pretty sure he's a UFA next year. So they could just acquire him for one more month or just trade him as trade bait to some other team and retain from there. So if teams don't want Riley Smith because his cap hit is too high, Coyotes could acquire him, retain, and then trade to that original interested team in Riley Smith. We've obviously tried to be very creative in trying to generate picks, and we're going to continue to do that all the way through. That's something we haven't been shy about, trying to acquire picks and cap space because a flat cap has been at a premium. So we've always tried to use that to our advantage, and we'll continue to do so. The Coyotes have about $34 million in trade deadline cap space. I know I'll make a whole trade deadline video talking about their cap space where they could help out some teams looking to overload for the playoffs. Like Toronto, I think they're looking to offload Nick Ritchie to try and fit in a more impact player on their forward core or maybe their defensive core. Imagine a day where this plan all comes together. It feels so far away right now. Yes, it does. The Coyotes haven't won a playoff series since 2012, not counting the play-in round in 2020. Not sure why they won't count it there because, you know, a lot of teams failed to win their playoff bubble play-in round, and the Coyotes did. So you should make note of that they did win their play-in round because some high-market teams didn't. Edmonton and Toronto as examples. The desert was rocking back in 2012. Those moments have been so few and far between for this franchise, which has missed the playoffs 14 of the past 18 years. The previous regime, led by John Chaika, came in with interesting ideas as well, but Armstrong can't control what's happened before him. He will be judged on his attempt to fully rebuild the Coyotes into what he hopes is an elite contend every year franchise. He knows how daunting this is. As for our timeline, going back to Tampa Bay, Pittsburgh, St. Louis, and Washington, the timeline is greatly affected if you hit right on the mark with your high-end picks out of the gate. Sorry, the timeline is sped up if you hit the impact player. If you get 2 impact players, the timeline speeds up a lot. If you got to do it with 1,000 different cuts, like we might have to, with all our picks, maybe it takes a little longer. And obviously I mentioned all those teams and Colorado, Toronto, Carolina. It's always 2 high-end impact players. And it takes a while. You know, the hockey guy made a video recently in the Ducharme firing from Montreal, taking a look at the last place teams and how long it took them to win cups. And only 2 teams have done it since in 20 years. St. Louis was last place in 05-06, and then it took them 13 years to win the cup in 2019. And then Tampa Bay was last place in 07-08 and took them 12 years to win the cup in 2020, and then 13 years to win it in 2021. So Buffalo's been last place 4 times in the past 20 years. Edmonton's been last place twice. The 2 closest teams to winning the cup that have been last place are the Avalanche, who are last place in 16-17, so it's been 5 years for them. And Toronto, last place in 15-16, so it's been 6 years for them. So they've maybe shortened it a little bit. They are favorites to win the cup, both the Avalanche and Toronto. I think more Avalanche. So that you can shorten that cup drought, you know, if you draft well and hit on your marks in succeeding drafts. Whereas finishing last, just because you finish last doesn't mean you're going to win a cup, because only 2 teams have done it. And the Coyotes aren't even finishing last this year because Montreal is finishing last. And the Coyotes have never finished last place. So if they fail at making last place this year, I think they will try again for next season, just because the high-end talent in next year's draft is just so high that they'd be foolish not to try again to tank. And their environment is set up to tank again next year. They have a lot of expiring free agents this upcoming summer, just like they had last summer coming into this season. So they're going to be in the same situation as last summer, but maybe with less players to offload because they're going to hold on to Keller, hold on to Schmaltz unless someone wants Nick Schmaltz for that contract. Maybe load off Jacob Chikrin, but other than that, there's not really anyone else. They want to hold on to Krause. And then Barrett Hayden, his value isn't high at all, so they would probably hold on to Hayden. And their center depth position down the pipeline is pretty brutal, so you'd want to hold on to a young guy like Hayden who has a pretty high ceiling. It's a franchise that's desperately finally needs to hit on its game plan, a game plan that is already in motion. Will it work? I won't pretend to know that answer, neither would I. But the scorched earth approach, at the very least, was probably the way to go. And I think in hindsight, this was the way to go. This team was never going to win the cup with that roster they had. They could have made the playoffs consistently with that roster with some tweaks here and there. But they want a new arena, a new fan base, a new culture surrounding the Coyotes where they are like the Avalanche and Carolina and Tampa and Toronto, where they're competing and they're favorites in the playoffs. Sure, they're going to hit roadblocks like Toronto and Avalanche, but as long as you're a favorite and always contending and always having exciting regular seasons, that's all we need, and to grow the fan base and to build a culture of winning and greatness, to be honest. So, just a fun little article. I'm sure I'll try to find more. I'm going to look at their draft prospects, see who they're ranking for the 2022 draft, and we'll go from there. So that's it for me. Thank you for watching. If you like what you see, spread the word. And as always, thank you for your support.